We isolated ourselves in a cabin in Michigan, and when we found out what was harassing us at that cabin, it broke our hearts. I'm gonna give you every detail I possibly can, a play-by-play of this entire interaction, and I guarantee you're not going to be able to guess what happens at the end. But I'll be quick. If you're ready to suspend your disbelief and get fully immersed in today's adventure, then you've found your new favorite channel. We post once a week, but there's plenty on the channel to binge. So if you're ready, like the video for good luck because you're gonna need it. And also make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any uploads. Enjoy the show. If you guys didn't know, my girlfriend's name is Jess, and Jess and I needed to get away from the house for a little bit a couple months ago, but we didn't want to fly anywhere far. We just wanted to drive somewhere really quick and just get away from our everyday life for a moment. We didn't want to hop on a plane and fly hours away or deal with airports. We just wanted to hop into our car and drive somewhere relatively nearby, so we decided to rent a cabin in Michigan. It would only be about a 5-hour drive from our house to this cabin in Michigan, and it wasn't that bad because we have a Honda Odyssey, and if you didn't know, Honda Odysseys are the best road trip vehicle in my humble opinion. We were even considering taking the middle seats out of our minivan so we could just drive it anywhere, just put a mattress in there and just camp at some random campground. And I wish we did that because this cabin was not what we expected it to be. We weren't trying to break the bank on doing this weekend trip, so we found a little spot on Verbo. So anyway, we booked our stay, we packed our bags, we threw them in the car, and we headed towards our isolated cabin in the woods. At the time, it didn't really bother us that this cabin was miles and miles away from any other houses because we wanted a solid 3 days of peace and quiet. We arrived at the cabin at about 12:45, right around the time that we were aiming for. And before I tell you about the cabin and everything that happened, I need to tell you about the property. So when I explain what happened, it makes sense. So the cabin was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by trees, and it was right by a small lake. The lake was surrounded by huge trees, but then there was a distinct 30-foot trail from the water to the cabin. And the cabin definitely had a very modern, rustic look to it, but the wood on the outside of the cabin looked very new. It was so new that you could actually smell how fresh it was. It looked as if it was built a little over a month ago. And while I was talking to the owner of the cabin, his name was Reese, he mentioned that the inside of the cabin had been fully renovated recently, but by the looks of this thing, it looked like the outside was fully renovated as well. But anyway, the windows on this cabin were enormous. They weren't exactly ceiling to floor, but they were damn close, and they were around the entire house. You could see into this cabin from just about every angle from the woods. And when you're inside the cabin, you could see pretty much 360 all the way around you. The deck on the front of the cabin was pretty small, and there was just some basic furniture on there, but then there was this old raggedy rocking chair right next to the front door. Like, I'm talking about one of those old school rocking chairs, and it was just off to the side a little bit, and it was just sitting right in front of one of the large windows. But by the look of this entire cabin, it just looked as if this chair stuck out and shouldn't have been there. It didn't match the aesthetic at all. It looked as if some of the furniture that was supposed to be there was dragged out of the way to the other side of the porch to make room for this raggedy old chair. The curved bottoms of this chair looked as if it was either sitting in or dragged through mud. And we were really in the middle of nowhere. When you look into this tree line and you look around where we are, there is no one in sight. There isn't a house. There's nothing around. But at the time, we were really excited about that. So we just go in and we start settling into the house. And it's everything that we wanted. At this point, it is a dream. It smells like vanilla when we open the front door. It has an open layout. It's rustic. This is very important too. From the front door, from the second you walk in, you can see this entire place. You could see the kitchen, the living room, the bedroom doors. It is a completely open landscape, and then there's a 360 view of windows of the surrounding woods. You could see and hear everything that goes on in this house. One thing that made me like it is that if there was an intruder, they would have to hide in plain sight. Nobody's hiding from you here. You could see and hear everything. So we're in the master bedroom, and like I said, there's windows all around us. But luckily, there were sheer curtains and blackout curtains. So if you didn't want to wake up early, you didn't have to. You could just shut them, and you didn't have to stare into the dark abyss of the deep woods as you're trying to fall asleep. So we finish exploring the bedroom and we start looking over the house. Jess is so excited, and she's just so sweet and looks at me and says, "I'm so happy we found this place. We needed this weekend. I'm just so happy to be here." This just made me so happy because being able to take her out to a cabin like this and experience some solitude, this just brings me such fulfillment just seeing her walk around happy, giggling, taking in the entire place. But as a man in that situation, in complete isolation with with your woman, you still have this underlying sense of protectiveness. You're always on edge a little bit because there's no help anywhere near you. So even though I'm enjoying seeing her so excited and so happy, I'm still a little on edge. So we'd fully settled in. It was only about 2 p.m. and we were ready to start our exploring. We wanted to go see the rest of the property. So we left the house, we walked on that trail down to the pond. We were just taking in how beautiful this place was. And as we were walking back to the cabin, Jess points and she goes, yo, they have bikes. We should take those bikes to go see that nearby horse farm that we drove by like 10 minutes before we got here. It was a long drive out here, so I thought might as well get the blood flowing. It'll probably be nice to get some real fresh air and get some wind in my lungs. But before we got onto the bikes, we had to throw on some sunscreen because the summer just started and our skin wasn't used to the beaming sunlight. So we hop on these bikes and we head down the path that we took to this cabin until we get to the main road, and we just strolled down to that farm. And after about 30 minutes or so, we finally pulled up. There was just this little house surrounded by a large plot of land, and there was horses all over the land. Jess naturally starts trying to call one over because she wants to get a better look at it. The horses probably don't get many visitors, so they aren't even thinking about walking up to the fence. But the owner of the property is probably pretty curious about who this random visitor is at the end of her property. But we didn't really take that into account. Jess looked at me a little bit nervous because she wasn't sure if this woman was aggravated that we were lingering around her property. So naturally, I just take control of the situation, and as this woman is walking up, I just greet her. I'm like, hey, hello, we're just admiring your beautiful horses. And this little sweet lady was like, don't even worry about it. I saw you guys from my window, so I brought you guys some carrots so you could feed the horses. And this older lady was an absolute doll. She introduced herself as Marge. She lived with her husband named Wesley, and they've just lived on this property for years. And she was just sharing a little bit about herself. So naturally, we just introduce ourselves back. We tell her what we do for a living, our names, what we're doing out here. But once the small talk was over, Marge just looked at us and she was like, how did you guys even get here? I know you guys didn't ride those bikes all the way from Chicago. We just have a little laugh about it. Then Jess explains that we're staying at Reese's cabin just down the road for a little weekend getaway. And when Jess was explaining that, she said it in a very cheery manner, but I saw her expression change. So I look at Marge and I see why. I saw the look, the scowl on Marge's face when we mentioned Reese's cabin. I wasn't sure what changed the tone here. Maybe because she didn't like people renting out spaces near her. Maybe she was against Vrbo or Airbnb type people. But I needed a little bit of an explanation. So I kind of look at Marge to get a little bit more information out of her. And Marge just goes, it's a shame what happened to those people. It's a shame what Reese did to those people. And she's dead serious, and we're like, what are you talking about? Why is she talking about it like a massacre happened there? Like, what did Reese do? So me and Jess looks at each other like, what is going on? So I just follow up with Marge and I'm like, what do you mean? What happened to what people? But Marge just shook her head and didn't give any more details. She just excused herself and just said that she has to get back to cook some dinner for her husband and just told us to have a beautiful night. Once Marge is out of earshot, Jess looks at me and goes, why do you think she didn't answer your question? Like, what is going on here? It was such a weird, ominous thing to say, and then to not provide any additional information about what she was talking about is crazy. And I could tell that Jess was stewing over what just happened even when we got back onto our bikes. And as we started pedaling, she gave me that look like, I'm gonna need you to do something for me. And she goes, do you mind texting Reese a few questions when we get back? I kind of want some answers. I just nodded my head just to go along with it, half hoping that she would forget about it. I just didn't want to talk about it that much anymore, because to me, I wasn't so sure that we should make such a big deal out of it and have to text the host and start this drama between this nearby neighbor and these vague accusations she made against Reese. On the way back, we were just chatting about it. We couldn't get off the subject yet, and we were just coming up with different theories and possibilities with what Marge meant by what she said. We kept throwing ideas back and forth, and Jess's were a little bit more ominous because it freaked her out a little bit more than it freaked me out, but I was trying to throw things back that were a little more PG just to calm her down a little bit. But eventually we got back to the cabin and we just threw our bikes back to where we got them and went inside the cabin. It was about 4 p.m.-ish at this point. We wanted to have a little bit of a snack, but Jess didn't forget that she wanted me to text Reese. So she let me know, I'm sitting here, I'm watching, why don't you go ahead and shoot that text for me? I knew I had to do it because she was looking over my shoulder, watching my phone, but I didn't want to. So I take my last crack at de-escalating the situation. I'm just like, babe, I don't think she even knew who Reese was. I don't think this is that important. I don't think we have to do this. But she wasn't getting off the subject, and I was just like, fine, I'll text Reese. But I texted him in a very casual way. I said, hey Reese, I don't want to bother you and it's nothing serious. Just one quick question for you. Jess and I ran into Marge, who is a neighbor of your property. She mentioned something a little bit weird to us. She said it was such a shame what happened to those people, referring to the people that lived here prior to you renting it to us. This made us feel very weird and uncomfortable for staying here, and I just am hoping that you could give me a little bit of clarity about what she meant by that. I showed it to Jess and she wanted a little bit of justice, so she was just like, I'm very curious to see what his response Jess is. So after I shot out that text, we just sat down and enjoyed our lunch for a little bit. We were just chatting about what we were gonna watch later that evening, and Jess was just like, I don't wanna watch anything spooky, I just wanna watch a comedy. We ended up watching the movie on the iPad in bed, and we both just pretty much passed out halfway through, and we were just sound asleep. At least I thought we were sound asleep, because I had a fantastic night's sleep. I felt completely rejuvenated. I was ready for the second day of this trip. And I look over at Jess, and she does not look as rejuvenated as I did. She looked like she didn't get a wink of sleep. She just looked so exhausted. She didn't even look up from her phone, like as if she didn't notice that I woke up. But when I finally got her attention, she looked at me and I was like, yo, what is wrong? And she looked me right in the eyes and she goes, I heard the knocking again. And I look at her confused for a second, and then I reply, what knocking? What are you talking about? And she just starts rubbing her eyes and she sighs a little bit, almost as if she's exhaling her answer, and she just says, the same knocking that I heard outside of our window in Arizona. And then it clicked to me. Apparently, there was some type of repetitive knocking outside of our window when we took a trip to Arizona. And we actually have the footage. She recorded it that night in Phoenix to show it to me. We'll play it right here for you. I could feel my face showing the expressions of shock, but I'm trying to suppress them because I don't want to rile her up. I don't want to scare her more and lean into what's freaking her out. I didn't know how to reply in that moment other than just saying, oh yeah, that's weird. She looks at me through the top of her eyes and she goes, and I heard the rocking chair rocking. And right away, I try to jump to the conclusion that makes sense to de-escalate the situation. And I just think that was wind. For sure, just a gust of wind. But Jess walks over my assumption and just goes, I heard it rocking consistently as if somebody was in it. I start joking about a woodpecker because I told her that the sound that we heard outside of the Phoenix hotel was most likely a woodpecker. At least that was the only thing that I could compare that sound to. I could tell she was still uneasy about it and didn't really want to joke about it, so I tried to hit her with a little bit more of a reasonable take, and I just started explaining to her that we're in a forest and there's animals around here. This very easily could have been a woodpecker. There could have been a raccoon in the rocking chair. But I knew that what Marge said the night before had spiraled her into these thoughts and kept her up all night. Honestly, I didn't know if anything weird was going on at the time. I slept straight through it. I didn't hear a thing. When I internally thought about it, is it weird that she heard the exact same sound outside of the window here as we did in Phoenix? Yes, it's a little bit weird, but I didn't want to show her that I was worried about it. I just want to make sure she feels okay. So I just changed the subject because I want to start the day on a positive note. I just want to have a nice cup of coffee and go on a nice long walk because I knew that this would be the best way to start our day, and I knew it would get Jess back into a better mood. So that's exactly what we did. We just chose to walk on the path that we took to the cabin because we wanted to stay on distinct paths. We didn't want to wander off trail or get lost or do anything like that. So we walked around the area for about an hour and then Jess brought something up that I completely forgot about. In a still rather drowsy tone, she just asked, did Reese text you back? I had completely forgotten about that whole Marge situation, but it was a little bit weird that he didn't even shoot me a text back while we were staying at his property. Even if it was just a quick text to acknowledge that he read it, just to give me a little bit of clarity, even if he wanted to dance around the subject. Radio silence was weird. I let her know that he didn't reply, but again, I just tried to de-escalate the situation and just downplay it. So we head back and we're chatting about it a little bit, but I'm still trying to divert the conversation to fun things that we're going to do that day instead of hyper-focusing on Reese and Marge. And the best way for me to do that is to convince Jess to do a little workout with me in the afternoon. So we get to the cabin, we break a little sweat. And after we finish working out, we just go back into the cabin, we just start having a nice little breakfast and just chat. Everything was going pretty good for a little bit. We were just chatting and laughing and having a good time. But then I noticed Jess start messing with her eyes, and she started rubbing her eyes, not in a drowsy way, but in an irritated way. And then I look at her and I'm like, hey, are you okay? And she starts complaining about her eyes a little bit. So I turn her head towards me to inspect them, and they're a little bit red, nothing too crazy, so we just keep eating. But as the minutes go on, I just see her keep itching at her eyes, and they get more and more red, and they actually start to look really bad. And then she confesses to me that they are burning really bad, and she's barely able to open them, but I'm pulling down her eyelids to try to get a good look at the whites of her eyes, and they're almost completely red at this point. It got to the point where the lids were swelling and she could barely keep her eyes open. I'm actually starting to freak out a little bit because it looks like a major reaction. I'm thinking, we didn't have any shellfish, she didn't get stung by a bee, what's going on with her eyes? So I'm trying to backtrack, like, what did she do for this to happen? And then she says, I might have got sunscreen in my eyes again. And then I think we just worked out. She definitely put sunscreen on her forehead and it definitely dripped into her eyes again. And apparently this one isn't an all natural one and it is giving her a major allergic reaction. So I guide her to the shower and I just tell her to start rinsing out her eyes, just try to peel them open and let water get into them just to see if that would help, but it wasn't helping. So I ask her, what else can we do? And she's like, can you get my Vicine? And I'm like, where is it? And she's like, I think it's in my purse. It's not in her purse. Then she's like, I think it's in the car. So I just run out of the house to go to the car and I'm searching around the car for about 5 minutes for the Visine before I finally find it and I could head back in. But when I rush back into the room, she says the weirdest thing to me. With her eyes still closed, she just goes, why did you leave? I'm so confused because I'm like, you know exactly why I left. I just went to go get your Visine and I'm just trying to make sure that you're okay. And then she goes, why weren't you answering me? I'm like, because I was in the car. I wasn't even in the house. How could I answer you from outside? And she was giving me a lot of attitude and I know she's in pain. So I'm just thinking it's probably that, but I really didn't know what she was talking about. So I say exactly that. Babe, what are you talking about? I was in the car looking for your eye drops. And she replied in a very annoyed tone. She's just like, I know, but I heard you come back. And I'm like, babe, I just came back right now. And then she puts her hands out trying to get my attention about how frustrated she is. She goes, I heard you just come back in 2 minutes ago. I heard you walking around, I was talking to you and you were completely ignoring me. You weren't answering me. She seems dead serious, so I walk up to her and I grab her hand so she knows I'm right in front of her listening to her. And I just go, Lovey, I was outside the entire time. I don't know what you're talking about. She paused for a second. Her eyes were still barely closed and she was just trying to squint them open a little bit and she could see it's me. And then she finally gets some more words out. She says, I saw you. I saw you walking around. I was able to open my eyes for a second before the light started irritating it and I saw a blurry figure of you. I know you were in here. But I had to close them to rub them again, and when I opened them, you weren't there anymore. I know you're just trying to help, but it doesn't help ignoring me. Clearly in Jess's head, she saw me come back for sure, and I wasn't trying to pile onto the situation, so I just was trying to help her as much as I could. So I try to calm her down and I just say, let's just get these drops in your eyes, let's get your vision a little bit better, and let's make sure that you're feeling a little bit better. So I help drip the solution into her eyes. I just tell her to keep her eyes closed and let it seep in. But in my head, I'm a little bit curious about what she saw, and I want to go scope out the house a little bit. So I start looking around the house for this blurry figure that's similar to my size, but I don't see anything. I checked everything, the closets, the bathrooms, the bedroom. So I looked around all of the windows. I didn't see anybody anywhere around us. So I just chalked it up to her blurry vision and whatever reaction she's having to the sunscreen in her eyes. After I didn't find anybody in any crevice of the house, I just headed back to the bedroom to check on Jess, and she looked so much better. This Visine did the trick. Obviously, washing her eyes out with water helped to get the sunscreen out initially, but then the Visine definitely soothed her eyes, and she was actually able to open them, and they looked way less red, and I was so relieved to see that. She definitely seemed tired from the sleepless night before, but she was definitely in a better mood because her eyes weren't on fire anymore. But she just asked if we could have a low-key day and just spend some time on the deck and then just settle in and read and maybe watch some movies tonight, not do anything crazy. I just told her I thought that was a great idea and I was glad she was feeling better. We thought we were going to stay up and watch a lot of movies after dinner and really have a good cuddle movie night, but realistically, we were exhausted. She barely got any sleep the night before, so we were out pretty quickly. I was happy this day was over because it was a high tension day. A lot went on. I was very worried about her throughout the day, and I was just happy that she was going to get a good night's sleep that night. It's about 11:30 p.m. when we actually fell asleep, but Jess woke up to use the bathroom at about 3 a.m. She just rolled out of bed at 3 a.m. She didn't throw her glasses on. She didn't do anything like that. She just walked to the bathroom so she could just quickly use it and then get back to bed. Even though it's not our bedroom and bathroom, it's a very similar setup. The bathroom's right there. Even though it's an unfamiliar space, she was able to do it without the lights on and without her glasses on. I was fast asleep, so I didn't even hear her get up. I didn't even realize she used the bathroom. But what did wake me up was her gasping super loud. I opened my eyes to see her scrambling, trying to find the light switch frantically. She had her hand on the wall where our light switch would be at home, and she was looking for that, but it was in a different spot at this cabin, so she's not able to turn the light on in her frantic state. When she finally found the light, it just completely illuminated the entire room, and I'm just looking around trying to see what she's freaking out about. But when I'm not seeing anything initially, I just look at her and I'm like, yo, what is wrong? But she didn't answer me right away. She was just looking around the room really slowly, and when she finally felt ready to talk, she just looked at me and she said, I swear I saw a little boy standing right there. And I'm just like, a little boy? What are you talking about? She's like, a little boy. So naturally, I'm just like, where? And she points to the corner of the room, right at the foot of the bed near one of the large windows. I look at the corner and I don't see anybody. I don't hear anybody. So I'm just like, babe, this isn't the first time we've thought a chair with clothes on was a person. So why don't we go to sleep and actually get some sleep tonight? But she will not leave the doorway, and she goes, I swear there was a little boy right there. I swear he was there. And I know this is her second sleepless night. I know she's wound up, so I just gesture to her to come over to me because I just want to comfort her a little bit. She explains to me exactly what she saw, and I just try to comfort her by saying, stay here, I'm gonna check the entire house. So I get up, I look under every mattress, into every closet, into every room, and there's no little boy around, and I just let her know there's no one here. So once I know the house is completely clear, I turn the lights back off and I lay down next to her, which she didn't really like, but I'm just like, tell me more about what you saw. And the first question I asked her was, when did you see the boy? And she says, I saw him when I was coming back from the bathroom, and he wasn't standing too far away from the bed. He was right there. And I reply, what was he doing? What did he look like? Give me some descriptors. And she says he was just standing there. He wasn't moving or saying anything. He was just standing there with this blank, kind of sad look on his face. He had these very round eyes, and he just had his head tilted down a little bit, looking out the tops of his eyes. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't like that. I didn't like the way that made me feel. I didn't like those descriptors. What she was saying freaked me out, but I just kept asking her questions. I didn't want to show her that I was freaked out. So I just asked, what happened after you saw him? And she says, I started freaking out and I tried to turn the lights on, but I couldn't find the switch. And then when I finally did turn the lights on, I didn't see him anymore. And at this point, I could see her calming down a little bit because she didn't feel like she was alone in the situation. I knew every detail that she saw, so at least we were in it together. And after a couple moments of silence, I could see that she was calming down a little bit and maybe came to the conclusion that she didn't see what she thought she saw. And then she made a little joke about it. She just said, to be fair, didn't have my glasses on, so who knows if I saw a little boy. And we both got a little chuckle out of that. And since I had turned the lights off before we laid down, the tiredness started kicking back in. We both started dozing off. And it's true, she didn't have her glasses on. It was dark. She was already a little bit freaked out of this place in general and of what Marge said and what happened earlier. So maybe she's just seeing some things and maybe there was nothing there. And that was enough for me to fall asleep. And when the alarm went off in the morning, we just hit snooze a couple times because our sleep was interrupted. Plus I wanted Jess to actually get a full night's sleep. This was our last full day at this cabin, so I wanted to make sure that she was fully rested and I was fully rested so we could make the best out of this day. We got up, showered, ate, and then we planned the rest of the day. To be honest, we were looking for isolation, but it gets pretty boring pretty fast, and we were thinking about what we could possibly do today, and we were thinking maybe we ride the bikes back to Marge, but that might be a little bit tainted now and a little bit awkward, so we're like, what else can we do? And as I was trying to think of other activities, since we mentioned Marge, Jess goes, hey, have you heard from Reese yet? Because it reminded her of that situation. I actually hadn't checked my text, but I did see his name in my notifications. So I pop open my messages and I see that he did finally respond to us, but I did not like what I read. And Jess saw my facial expression reacting to what he said, and she's like, go ahead, tell me. Spill the tea. I want to hear it. And I actually had to read it over a few times just to make sure that I read it right. This is what he said. I'm sorry for the delay. Work conference this weekend. Marge and her husband are very simple people and are not all there. I'm sorry you had to interact with her. The people in the surrounding areas are of a particular class. It's something we're actively working on changing. Just don't mingle with them if you could help it. What a rude dude. At first, we thought Reese was the man from all the amenities that he set up here, but this dude was an ass. And I'm looking at Jess and she's absolutely appalled by his message, and her first reaction is to just start chatting shit about Reese. She goes, Marge is such a better guy than him. She takes good care of her horses. Reese is just a pompous ass. She does not like this guy. And I totally agreed. Nothing about what Reese said was even remotely true about Marge, and the way he addressed my concerns about it was just disgusting. And even though we didn't like this new information about who we were renting this place from, I still had to remind Jess, we're here to have a good time. Let's not taint our trip based on this pompous dude. It was about 4 in the afternoon on our last day at this point, and we decided we're gonna go on a nice long walk around the area. Jess and I actually managed to have a good time on this walk, even though what was happening with Reese and Marge and the sleepless nights at this cabin, but we realized that we had just been chatting and talking too long and we might have gone too far away from the cabin. So we decided to turn back around before we got completely lost, or we were like a full hour away from where we should be. And we must have been gone for way longer than I thought, because as we started to turn around, the sun was already starting to set, and it felt like we were going to be walking in the pitch black very soon if we didn't speed up, so we started power walking to make it back. And after about 40 minutes of very efficient power walking, we finally saw the cabin right before the sunset. We knew we only had about 5 minutes left of this walk, so we were going to make it. But as we were walking up to the cabin, we noticed that in the lawn in the backyard, there were actually these large rocks lined up next to each other. They weren't boulders, but they weren't little skipping rocks either. That like somebody would have to move these and line them up. There were 3 of them perfectly aligned with flowers all around them, as if somebody plucked a bouquet and left them. I didn't really notice the flowers initially, but Jess brought it to my attention. She's like, wow, those are some nice flowers. They actually look fresh. And we paused for a second. I looked around and my gut instinct was to just reply, it looks like somebody put them here. They are nice. And Jess just stared at me when I said it. I didn't really think about how hard those words were going to hit when they came out of my mouth, but then I realized by her reaction that me saying it looks like somebody put them here is a little nerve-wracking on top of an already nerve-wracking weekend for her. So I just make her come inside with me, and I just try to change the subject, but I could tell that there is no scenario where I could make her feel safe here. So luckily, this was our last night. We were leaving first thing in the morning. We were out of here, and we were never coming back. So once we were in the cabin, we just went right to the kitchen to get a glass of water because we had been power walking for like an hour. I was looking out of these big wide windows, and I noticed we had a little bit of sunlight left, so I suggested that we should spend some time on the front porch, maybe walk by the lake, just to enjoy this last night, just to try to set the tone a little bit more positive. And Jess agreed. She just said, let me just go get my chapstick from my purse. So she went to the bedroom where her purse was, and I just whipped my phone out to scroll a little bit as I'm waiting for her, because I know it's not just the chapstick. She's gonna throw a little mascara. She's gonna make sure she looks right. This is gonna be about a 3 to 4 minute ordeal, not a quick chapstick thing. So I know I have some time to scroll. As I tried to start scrolling, I realized that the Wi-Fi was down. It was probably spotty out here in general. So I just did a quick scroll through my photo album to review the photos that I had taken of that weekend. So I'm just standing there, just scrolling through my phone, drinking my glass of water, and then I see Jess from the corner of my eye storming into the room. So I whip my head towards her because I don't know why she's stomping towards me. And I'm just like, yo, what's going on? And she looks at me dead serious. Somebody moved stuff around in our room. I feel my eyebrows scrunched together, and the only thing I could come up with is, what? And then just repeats herself in the same serious tone, but she says it slower this time. Someone moved things around in our room. And she immediately grabs my wrist and just starts pulling me towards the bedroom to show me. Once I'm in there, I'm just looking around. In my head, I don't really keep tabs on where I put things down. I just kind of take stuff out of my bag and toss it. So I'm not seeing anything out of place. But Jess always remembers everything, so I'm hearing her out. So I just ask her what's out of place. And then she goes, my purse was in that chair by the window, and now it's on the bed. Your backpack was on the floor, and it was next to the nightstand, and it was zipped. But now it's by the closet, and it's unzipped. And listen, guys, I felt lost in this situation. I really don't pay attention to where I place things. But now that all of this stuff has happened, I can't sit here and pretend that it wasn't getting to me. First we had Marge, then we had a blurry figure walking around the house while Jess's eyes were burning, then we had a kid at the end of the bed. I couldn't tell you that these things weren't adding up to me and not freaking me out. Part of me started to feel as if there was something going on in this house that didn't want us here. I just started to get this overwhelming feeling that we weren't welcome here. But as I'm coming to this crazy conclusion, I have to shove it out of my head. I can't think like that. I have somebody here that I need to protect, and I need to assess this situation tactically, and if something is happening here, we need to leave. I didn't really know what to say in that situation. I didn't know what step to take next. I needed a moment to think. So I'm just looking at these items that she's saying were misplaced. And then she excuses herself from the room to go get her glass of water. I didn't love the idea of splitting up in the house, but it was so close. It would take me 5 steps to get to her. So I just allowed her to go get her beverage as I was just trying to assess all of the information that I had. So I start looking through my bag, and I'm trying to remember if I left this bag in a different area. I'm trying to remember if I had zipped it. And to be honest, I really didn't remember. I'm going through it for a couple seconds, maybe 15, maybe 20, and then I hear Jess call out for me from the other room, and I just spring up. And before I even get to the doorway, I just hear her say, "He's back," followed up by a terrified scream. So at this point, I'm at a full sprint, and I just see Jess standing in the middle of the house, just looking at the front door, which is wide open. And I'm looking at her. I don't know if I have to run towards somebody or run to her, but she just goes, "Look out the window." So I just run up to her so I could see out of the window that she's looking out of. And then I see the kid. But it's not just a kid. There's a woman with old straggly clothes and long black hair holding the kid, like bear hugging him, sprinting into the woods, and I could just see his little face popped over her left shoulder, looking at me with big round eyes through the top of his lids, looking as sad as ever, just like Jess explained him. And just like that, they just both disappear into the forest. I only saw this woman for about 3 strides in her sprint, and then just like that, poof, she's gone, just part of the forest. So I slam the front door closed and I lock it before running over to Jess, just trying to console her, and she's explaining to me that she just saw him standing in the doorway, and I tried to talk to him and he wouldn't answer me. He was just standing there looking at me silently, and then right as I'm about to walk over to him to see if he needs any help, 2 arms just reach over and just grab him aggressively, and I just see her through the window sprinting towards the forest. The only thing that I could think about doing in this situation is we grab a couple knives and we go barricade ourselves in the bedroom until morning. It was dark, we had no cell service, there's no way that we're leaving this house. I only want 1 point of entry, and I want to have weapons ready for whoever comes through that door. And I made sure I didn't get a big butcher knife. I got a nice steak knife about 7 inches long that I could use in a very seriously violent manner to protect my woman if I need to. And once we're barricaded in the room and I slide one of the dressers in front of the door, Jess looks at me and says, should we leave right now? And I go, absolutely not. It is dark, we can't do that. We need to camp out here one more night. I promise it's going to be okay. And she's like, should we call the police then? And I don't even know how to answer her because of all of the thoughts that are going through my head. She wants to get out of here. She doesn't want to be here anymore. But I'm dealing with the thought that there was a man in this house when I was getting her Visine. When she saw that boy again and she saw that woman, she just felt like her fears were validated. But for me, I thought I allowed a man to walk into the cabin where my woman was alone, not able to see, and it was very, very real. So in her head, she's dealing with this whole situation being real, but I'm dealing with the fact that I didn't protect her properly and I was downplaying everything this entire time. But as I'm thinking, she repeats herself, asks the same question, and I'm just like, babe, we don't have any service. We can't call anyone. And I just reassure her, we stay right here and I'm going to keep you safe. And Jess just nods her head. She agrees with what I'm saying. She's willing to comply what I'm asking her to do. And we just stay quiet and we just listen for any little noise around the house. And it was very quiet for a moment, but then I started hearing a series of sticks and twigs breaking right outside of the house. And I knew somebody was out there. So I slowly creep up to the window, which we had the blackout curtains in front of, so we couldn't see directly out of them. Plus I wanted them closed because I didn't want people to be able to see in, just in case they wanted to come back in. I wanted to have the drop on them. So I just peel back the blackout window just to look in the direction where I'm hearing that sound. And there's nothing outside of the window initially, so I slowly close it. And then Jess asked me, did we lock the front door? And neither of us are going out there. We're not splitting up. There's no scenario where that's happening. So I just tell her, don't worry about the front door. This door is locked and we're going to be safe in here. Nobody's getting through that door and nobody's getting through me to you. And I could tell that helped her a little bit, and then she wanted to come peek out of the windows to see if she spotted anything, just so we could keep an eye on whoever's around this cabin. So she goes over to the window to the left and I go back to the one that I was at to the right. But when she slips her curtain back, she immediately goes, I see him, so I rush over to look as well. And I see this little kid just standing at the edge of this tree line, looking like an absolute freak. I don't mean to call him a freak, but the way he looked standing at the edge of this forest was so haunting. He was barely visible. He was only visible by the moonlight, and he just had this horrible deadpan face. He had no emotion. He looked as if he was longing to be in this house. So this entire weekend, I had been putting off all of the things that Jess was noticing. But now, since I knew it was real, it was time to talk about what was happening. We had to stay here. We were waiting till the sun came up, so it was time to talk. I was trying to come to terms with the fact that this might not be a natural occurrence. That kid, the way he looked at the edge of those woods, looked unnatural to me. Maybe it was the lighting, maybe it was the expression on his face, but something about him was off. And I only got a split-second glimpse of the woman that was carrying him. I didn't see her face. I didn't see any details about her. She didn't talk. She didn't justify why this little boy was in front of the house. She didn't explain herself. So I have no reason to believe that this was a normal thing. And not to mention, when Jess said that she saw somebody in the house that she thought was me, that was the size of a man but was blurry, she just said it was a blurry figure. So I'm just going over all of these possibilities, and I'm battling with the thoughts of, is this a real situation where I'm gonna have to fight off real people to protect my girl? Or is this a supernatural situation where we are just unwelcome here? And then Jess brings it up to me. She connects some dots and she says, we saw a little boy, a woman, and a man. And there were 3 stones out there that looked like makeshift graves that were decorated with flowers. And that sent us over the edge, and we were just in a full anxiety-ridden state for the rest of the night. So throughout the night, I had Jess just pack up all of our stuff as I sat there in the most aggressive state that I've ever been in, ready to protect everything that was mine. It was completely dark around us. At a certain point, I just opened all of the blinds because I wanted a 360 view of anybody around us. I didn't care if they saw us. I just wanted to see them so they knew that if they came and approached us, they were going to have to deal with something serious. We didn't see anything else for the rest of the night, and it got to the point where I was so blinded by anger, just being on edge, ready to protect at any moment, that Jess had to remind me and almost shake me out of that state to show me that the sun was coming up. I didn't even realize I was just in a primal protective mode. So I knew it was time to leave. We already had all of our stuff packed. All we had to do was get to our car. But we hadn't been into the main house since we had locked that door and barricaded it. And we were only able to see out of the back windows, so we don't know if they circled the house. They could be in the front of the house for all we know. They could be in the house. So I slide the dresser away, open that door, and I'm in a duck walk with my weapon, just turning every corner, ready to assault anybody that is possibly in this cabin with us. But there's nobody there, and the house is clear. And I get to the front door and it's still locked. Nobody came in. All the windows were closed. And when I look out of the front window, our car's there. It's intact. It looks like all of the wheels are fine. So I have Jess come up behind me. I unlock the door. I make sure that I have all of the bags that I could carry, and I make sure that she unlocks the car from where we are and has the trunk already open. So we're able to run to the car. I throw everything into the back and we just hop in and we get out of there. Once we were in the car, we locked the doors. I got us out of that small dirt path back onto the main road. The entire time we're looking in all of our rear view mirrors, make sure that nobody's following us. We're both still in this frantic state, trying to get any glimpse of anybody that could be a threat. I drove as fast as I could, as fast as I responsibly could, to make sure we didn't crash, because imagine that situation. But we just get through this dirt road, we're on the main road, and we're driving for about 5 minutes. Once we were on that road, I hand my phone to Jess and I just go, yo, text Reese, let him know we're leaving early, let him know what happened. And this dude never replied. No response is crazy. But we didn't know that at the time, so we were just about 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes into this drive away from the cabin, headed home. The car ride was silent for a couple minutes, and I could tell that Jess needed a couple moments just to come to terms with what just happened, and I was still struggling with if that was a real situation or if that was some type of spiritual situation. And I look at Jess and she is staring at something, and she goes, look at that. So I start to slow down a little bit and I turn my head to see what she's talking about, and then I saw it, and I just see a small trailer off into the distance, and then in front of that trailer I see a little boy, and this little kid is just in the little field out front of this trailer picking flowers, and behind him is a man just sanding some wood outside of his trailer. And then Jess points out the third person that's there, and she says, look, it's the woman, and she's sitting in the rocking chair. And at that moment, everything made sense to me. We weren't seeing spirits. This wasn't a supernatural situation. We weren't unwelcome in this cabin by some entity. These were real people, and they were at the cabin. Once we realized that those were the people that were in the cabin we were staying at and were harassing us all weekend, I put the pedal to the metal, because who knows if they're gonna hop in their car and start chasing us? Who knows who these people are? So I'm just trying to drive as fast as I can. I just want to get back to my house with my security, with my weapons, and I just want to feel safe for the first time in 3 days. But once we were about 45 minutes away and we really felt as if nobody's following us, those people are way back there, whatever that situation was, it's over, we start to talk about ways that we could figure out why that happened. So I tell Jess to start Googling Reese, try to figure out what is going on, because we connected the dots between Marge and Reese in that place, because Marge mentioned it was a shame what he did to those people, and we're assuming that that little family must be the people. So Jess starts digging through articles, looking up his company, looking him up, his LinkedIn, his company page, and then she typed in his full name, his company, and then Reddit. And everybody that knows this, anybody that does deep dives, you type Reddit in at the end of a Google search, you get the truth. And there was just series of threads from people absolutely bad-mouthing Reese's company and his dirty business tactics, and the way that apparently his large company that he's associated with purchases mortgages from the bank to take single home families to rent them out as Verbos or Airbnb Airbnbs and he just does dirty practices. And we just kept reading and reading. This dude was a bad dude. Finally, we found one about this particular family. He had done this to them. They had owned that property for generations. They were a simple family that liked to live in isolation like that, and they were so tight-knit. And apparently that particular family, when their grandparents passed away, the wife had a miscarriage, and those were the 3 makeshift graves on the property. And they were so attached to this property after getting it stolen from them, from this horrible man in this horrible company, that they couldn't help themselves but to come back to the property to pay homage to their lost loved ones that they buried on their property. And the parents did their best to stop their son from going to this property, but he longed for his old house, and that's why he was so sad. Well, that was today's story. I hope you consider liking. I hope you consider subscribing. I hope you stick around, and I hope you binge all my content, and I really hope you enjoyed it. I appreciate you watching. I appreciate this growing community. Thank you so much. I'm going to continue to provide content like this on a weekly basis. And if you enjoyed this video, YouTube thinks that you would also enjoy this one, so go ahead and click that and continue your binge.